Hello and welcome back to a brand new session of learning. Today I want to draw your attention to a very sensitive area, that is disability, or what is commonly known today as being differently abled. What do you think it is to be differently abled? Probably you will say a person with a paralyzed body, a missing sense organ, or a paralyzed brain is differently abled. But let me tell you, these people possess a unique set of abilities and perspectives. Everybody has ability and everybody matters. It's all about acknowledging it. Often at times, differently abled people see what a normal person can't, hear what we can't, and think what we can't. This makes their ability different, not inferior, not superior, just different. Many differently abled people are known to flourish and rejoice in life with the right opportunity, support and love. And in this session, we will read about two such differently abled people who became successful and renowned. And before I tell you more about them, here's a little information about the author of the story, Firdaus Kanga. Firdaus Kanga was born in 1960. He is a writer and an actor. He has written a novel, Trying to Grow, which is a semi-autobiographical novel set in India. He also wrote a travel book, Heaven on Wheels, about his experiences in the United Kingdom. Trying to Grow was later turned into a film by the name Sixth Happiness, for which he even wrote the screenplay. Interestingly, he also starred in the film. Now, the story that we are about to discuss is A Visit to Cambridge. It is a story about the meeting between two extraordinary people, and both of them were differently abled. The author, Firdaus Kanga, was born with brittle bones. It is a condition where bones tend to break easily. So he moves around in a wheelchair. And as you know, Stephen Hawking was one of the greatest scientists of our time. And he suffered from a form of paralysis that confined him to a wheelchair and allowed him to speak only by punching buttons on a computer. So when they met, these two great men exchanged their thoughts on what it meant to lead a life in a wheelchair and on how the so-called normal people reacted to the differently abled. A Visit to Cambridge by Firdaus Kanga. Cambridge was my metaphor for England. And it was strange that when I left, it had become altogether something else because I had met Stephen Hawking there. It was on a walking tour through Cambridge that the guide mentioned Stephen Hawking, poor man, who is quite disabled now, though he is a worthy successor to Isaac Newton, whose chair he has at the university. And I started because I had quite forgotten that this most brilliant and completely paralyzed astrophysicist, the author of A Brief History of Time, one of the biggest bestsellers ever, lived here. When the walking tour was done, I rushed to a phone booth and, almost tearing the cord so it could reach me outside, phoned Stephen Hawking's house. There was his assistant on the line, and I told him I had come in a wheelchair from India. Perhaps he thought I had propelled myself all the way, to write about my travels in Britain. I had to see Professor Hawking. Even 10 minutes would do. Half an hour, he said, from 3:30 to 4. And suddenly I felt weak all over. Growing up disabled, you get fed up with people asking you to be brave, as if you have a courage account on which you are too lazy to draw a check. The only thing that makes you stronger is seeing somebody like you achieving something huge. Then you know how much is possible and you reach out further than you ever thought you could. I haven't been brave, said his disembodied computer voice the next afternoon. I've had no choice. Surely, I wanted to say, living creatively with the reality of his disintegrating body was a choice. So, from what we read, we can see that in this part of the story, we are introduced to the two great men, Firdaus Kanga and Stephen Hawking. For Kanga, Cambridge represented England. But that was before he was fortunate enough to meet someone as great as Stephen Hawking. After he met Stephen Hawking, his entire view changed. So this is how they met. Once, while his tour guide was walking him through Cambridge, he mentioned Stephen Hawking. The guide addressed Hawking as a poor man who was then disabled. He also called him the worthy successor to Isaac Newton. Kanga was taken aback as he had completely forgotten that Stephen Hawking lived here. You see, Stephen Hawking was no ordinary man. Although completely paralyzed, he was a brilliant astrophysicist and the author of the bestseller, A Brief History of Time. Obviously, Kanga was more than eager to meet Hawking. As soon as the walking tour was done, he rushed to a phone booth and phoned Stephen Hawking's house. His assistant answered the call. Then Kanga told him that he had travelled all the way from India in a wheelchair to write about his travels in Britain. Later, he stressed that he had to see Professor Hawking, even if it was just for 10 minutes. Eventually, the assistant allowed him half an hour, from 3:30 to 4 in the afternoon. For Kanga, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and so he was really nervous. As he too was a differently abled child, people around him constantly advised him to have courage. But for him, the only thing that gave him courage was to see another differently abled person achieving something huge. It inspired him to think that the impossible could be achieved by someone who was facing the same challenges that he was. Now, don't you think that this is an awe-inspiring story? It's lovely, isn't it? I just can't stop myself from reading further. Do you want to know what happens next? With that thought, I shall take your leave, and I will surely return with more life-changing stories for you. See you. Bye.
Tutormate. For more amazing video lectures, download the free app on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store.